Hope Was Here by Joan Bauer. Chapter 18. You don't understand the power of loss when it first hits you like a baseball coming fast from an out-of-control pitcher. You reel back stinging from the blow. It's the third day after an injury when the pain really starts to throb. I'd known enough blows in my life, but this one had a special sting. When a good man gets beaten by a bad one, it makes you not want to get up in the morning. It makes you hate the whole world.
Well, we sure gave it all we had,
GT said.
We made an inroad in people's consciences.
But I didn't think we'd made enough of one, or we'd have won. I wasn't accepting miscongeniality for anything. Lots of people were having this problem. Adam was bitter about everything. Millstone stole this election. We should have fought dirt with dirt. Sid Vole, whose candidate in Virginia had won, had personally called the governor of Wisconsin to see what could be done about it. After 2 weeks of intense checking, the official word was out. There were no signs of election tampering. The results stood. GT seemed a little lighter without the burden of campaign on his shoulders. Addie said she had never much wanted him to be mayor anyway.
Losing,
GT offered,
isn't anything to be ashamed of.
He told every campaign worker personally how much he appreciated how we'd worked for him. When he came to me, he said,
Hope, I want you to know how much your strength supported me these many months. You've got an inner courage that is a powerful thing to witness. I thank you for bringing that up here. I really needed it.
I didn't know what to say. Pastor Hall said this was one of those times when we just had to trust the Lord's ways. I wasn't trusting anything. The few reporters left in town had done what they called post-mortems, and moved out because we weren't important anymore. I tried to pull from the power in my name, but everything hopeful in me was dead. We limped through November, having a depressing Thanksgiving even though the food was brilliant. You can't enter a political campaign without accepting the fact that you might lose, Mr. Sage told our class. He had gotten a copy of the voting statistics from the election, which showed us who voted and who didn't, not who they voted for. 85% of the adult population in Mulhoney voted. I want you to be proud of these numbers. You were responsible for the highest voter turnout this town or any town has ever seen. I want you to think about all the people who registered to vote that probably wouldn't have if you hadn't been involved. I want you to try to recognize how you all learned to have a voice in the system. And you could have knocked me over with a cheap tip when I saw the name of my cranky customer, Mr. Woldenberg, there on the voting roster. He and his wife. They'd voted. They'd taken part in the process. We had to write a paper on what we remembered most about the campaign, what we thought our biggest contribution was. I wrote about passing out brochures and campaigning with GT. I wrote about Mr. Woldenberg and how you never really know sometimes when you're making a breakthrough with certain people. Mr. Sage wrote in the margins of my paper, one person touching many. What kind of a world is this when Gleason Beale gets away clean and free and GT Stoop gets beaten by a crook? I asked Braverman. He hugged me hard.
I'm the wrong one to ask, Hope.
We spent lots of time hugging. At least something felt good. I was in the A&P, looking for boxes of macaroni and cheese that I hid under my bed and made on the sneak when Addie wasn't home. Addie never cooked from mixes. That's when I saw Mr. Woldenberg, my best success of the whole election. He hadn't been in the diner for a few weeks. I looked in his shopping cart. He had 2 packages of cheddar cheese, no American. Will wonders never cease? Hi, Mr. Woldenberg. Remember me? His eyes squinted.
You harped on me to vote more than an inhuman has rights to.
I laughed. I'm sorry it seemed that way, but I'm glad you and your wife voted, Mr. Woldenberg. That's terrific.
What in the world are you talking about, girl?
You voted, Mr. Woldenberg. I don't know if you voted for Eli Millstone or GT Stoop, but you took part in the election process, and that's a really good thing. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I wasn't checking up on you, sir. I was just looking at the voting records, and your name was there along with your wife's. It made my day, I'll tell you, when I saw you'd done that.
That's the biggest fake I ever heard. I didn't register. I didn't vote, and neither did the missus.
I looked at his stern face. Mr. Woldenberg, you're not just kidding me.
I work 2 jobs. I don't have time for kidding or voting.
I tried to process this. Mr. Woldenberg, your wife and your wife's names were on the official election list as having registered and voted.
Don't care if you saw it written in the sky. We didn't do it.
My heart was in my larynx. Will you tell what you just told me to the election board? He said he wasn't going out of his way. They'll come to you. I didn't know if they would, but I was willing to drag them. The election board sent workers out to get the truth, covering Mulhoney like cockroaches in a cheap fourth-floor walk-up, checking every registered voter's vote against whether they actually voted or not. Braverman was doing big-time spatula tricks in the kitchen again. At the end of 10 days, we had a new ballgame. 120 registered voters on the official books claimed they never registered, much less voted. Eli Millstone was political toast. A few reporters proclaimed us a hotspot again. Then Braverman and Adam led the students of Mulhoney High to circle town hall with banners and posters, shouting down dishonesty in government. It was the third week in December, and Wisconsin was a vast frozen tundra. My screaming taunts turned to ice crystals the minute they left my mouth. I mentioned to Adam that it would be warmer protesting inside town hall, but he said we needed to be poised against the pureness of the freshly fallen snow to make the point that we, the teenagers of Mulhoney, were not going to take this anymore. We stood firm, 297 frozen teenagers dressed like Eskimos. It was so numbingly cold, and held a candlelight vigil outside town hall, singing, "We Shall Overcome." And as our united voices rose in force, Adam Pulver marched through the crowd, stood at the door of town hall, and shouted, "Mr. Mayor, we, the teenagers of Mulhoney, demand to live in a town that is not governed by lies and deceit. We demand your resignation." Adam raised his hands, embracing the spirit of the season, and started shouting, "Time to go! Ho, ho, ho!" We shouted it into the night until we thought our voices would give out, but they didn't. We were too strong and too fed up. You don't understand the power you have until you use it. That's what my boxing coach used to tell me. Finally, Eli Millstone's spokesperson came out as dawn broke against the sky. She read a statement from the mayor. "I have served this town faithfully as mayor, but it appears now that I cannot finish my third term because of this dissension of certain factions. I am resigning. I pray that Mulhoney will continue on in the great tradition I have set."
"We might change it a little bit,"
Braverman shouted. The whoop that went up from all of us was great and full. Al B. Hall showed up with 7 GOG members, and they began serving us hot chocolate and donuts from the gospel van. We stayed there shivering and savoring the victory. Pastor Hall said we had shouted down the walls of town hall just like Joshua shouted down the walls of Jericho. It happened finally on January 12th at high noon. G.T. Stoop stood on the platform that Eli Millstone had built for himself, put his hand on the Bible, and took the oath of office. He swore to uphold the laws of Mulhoney to the best of his ability, so help him God. Everyone there knew we'd heard an honest man make a pledge that he would take to heart every day he was mayor. Al B. Hall stood before us, his wool coat blowing open in the winter wind, and offered the prayer.
"Lord God Almighty, bless your servant, Gabriel Thomas Stoop, with the fullness of your wisdom, strength, and courage. Give him a fierce faith to lead this town, and let the love and kindness you've placed inside him pour out toward all." Snow started falling like a promise, dusting the streets with anticipation of good things to come. Everyone there felt the hope. Addie said it was like the thrill she got shoving a raw plucked chicken into the oven and knowing that in a little while she'd have a soul-satisfying entree. It takes a great cook to pull life truth from poultry.